Okay, so I'm going to talk. I'm going to blend both the topics of our classes into one, because I strongly believe that you know both are tied at the hip, and one happens in conjunction with the other. And to be clear, I'm sure I'm speaking of things that you already know, but product validation is a never-ending project. From feature to feature to just making sure that um, your product and your features are still relevant, or that there are competitors that you need to one up. But let's get started. This is a little bit of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to first tell you why I'm here and why they invited me to speak here. I'm going to make it really easy for you to skip this class by meeting one requirement, and if you do that, I don't think you need to do the rest of this. We're going to talk about user stories and how they differ in terms of doing user and market research versus user stories that are used for development. I'm going to share the way how I usually, the process at which I've landed over the years in terms of my standard way to validate user hypothesis in a problem area. And that is divided into both qualitative, and I'm going to talk like 4 questions that I try to ask, and what I do with those questions, which is called the user space. And then I'm going to tell you, 4 questions that I would include in any quantitative work, and what you do with that data to make a feature perception analysis. Finally, I always, and kind of giving away the recipe as we go over this, you got to go through the acid test before you really start to, invest, and that's basically measure your actual user intent. And then 2 recommendations for books that I really enjoy and have really helped me kind of land on my own style of product management. So, let's talk a little bit about myself. I'm Venezuelan. I lived there and grew up there for over 20 years, where I studied biology as my major. And from then on, I never did, I left academia pretty quickly. I went into, research and development for consumer packaged goods. I moved into, user and market research. And then after that, I moved to the US for my MBA. And in general, I've worked at about half of the companies that you see on that screen. And a few of them will become very apparent as we go through this presentation. One thing that you will notice is the large majority of my experience is B2B, B2C, specifically lots of video games. I know a lot of these projects are a little bit more institutional based. I have found, however, in working in prop tech and fintech, that these steps are also valid, and highly recommend that you follow them. All right, next up, how you can skip this class. Everybody tells you this, and everybody's right when they tell you this. The best way to find out if a product's going to work is by putting it out there. So if you have the resources to put together anything that is better than a functional prototype, and by functional prototype I mean it does the one thing, the one feature that it's supposed to do it, and it may look ugly, but it does it, and it does it reliably. If you can do that, then save yourself a lot of time, save your potential investors' time, your team's time, and just put it out there. Put it out there and start iterating, start failing as fast as you can, because when you're doing research, you have to always, as they say in my country, you have to take it with a splash of soda, because users, no matter how disciplined you are in establishing your test protocols, the better moderator that you become, you're still going to have biases from human beings that generally want to be helpful. And that always puts it's hard for people to tell you they don't like things. So, which means that if they tell you they don't like things, you better pay attention. But if you don't have the resources for a functional prototype, or even at that an MVP, I often stress the value of paper prototypes. And paper prototype is you do the operations by hand behind the scenes. you literally draw it out on paper and have a user touch it and see if they get how it works. Because even that starts to give you very real and usable data about where your product is failing and what its appeal is. However, particularly for super early teams, that's not necessarily an option. You may not even know exactly how to, you know that there's an opportunity somewhere, but you're still trying to figure out how to execute it or what the most valuable, problem space within that landscape is. So if you are in that case, then I think these next few steps are going to be useful to you. I guess a good idea of how to have a functional prototype and start to get data is a good case is Airbnb. I don't know how much you know about the story of Airbnb's origins, but it's quite a rich story and quite an exercise in creativity and elbow grease. So Airbnb struggled for the longest time after they had the idea to find to gain traction because it in and of itself was it's a tough flywheel to spin up. So after they did their first their first kind of like go around for New York, I forget which convention it was. They went pitched the idea to Y Combinator and got $20,000. So they went and decided to focus on the New York area. And as people were posting, like opening up their homes to be hosts, the pictures were awful. And during the first couple of days, people, they noticed that almost all pictures were awful, and almost nobody was clicking on anybody that didn't have a nice picture. So those guys went, they got in a car for several weeks, and every time somebody would list a house, they would go visit that house and take pictures for them to make sure that it was up to par, because users are lazy and they're not going to take the time to do that. And obviously that gave them it taught them a valuable lesson from the get-go. The product is not going to work without beautiful visual assets, but it also helped them. Hey, the product is running. We started to make revenue that allows them to go back to angel investors and get further funding, because they've already proved that even without all the technology, there's appeal for the product. All right. So with that in mind, let's go and talk about user stories, which is usually how people in product think. And it's that typical, story of as a blank, I would like to blank so that X. I think these stories are invaluable when you're trying to give developers, builders, teammates a vision that can give them context and can help them, go beyond the quote unquote page and build, fill in the corners. However, I don't think that they are the best mechanism for validating the same concept before it's built. So I tend to think of it as a hypothesis, and this is where my science background and user research background starts to shine out. And you can see that the wording on the right it has the exact same content that the version on the left. However, it more clearly lays out the cases in which I expect the feature to work. I'm a user or a user that has a specific need, a specific problem, because that presents the context at the beginning, as opposed to so that I can do X. I think there is a gap in terms of how you tend to think about the problem when you're trying to start the description with the solution as starting a solution with a problem. But the rest of it is I'm presented with a feature, and the user will perform a specific action. That action is missing from the user story format, and it's very important for visionaries to keep that in mind, because you're building features, you're building products to establish this business model, to reach these goals, but it all starts with I have a client, I have a user, I need them to press this button, I need them to open their wallets, I need them to sign in with their MetaMask, what have you. And finally, it really specifies that it's not that they're going to do it. They're going to do it more than they already are doing it, because it's very few problem spaces that don't already have a solution, or that lacking a solution, people have figured out workarounds. And you have to make sure that whatever you are producing is it's either 10 times better than already exists, or can reduce the complexity and the cost to do it by a factor of 10x. I usually find that having those big, broad goals, ensures that you're going to have a more powerful product. Oh, by the way, I failed to mention, stop me at any time if you have questions. If my slides, I know I tend to be more, talkative than putting my stuff in writing. So please stop me if something that you need help with. Okay, so let's talk about how we validate our hypotheses by the quote-unquote book. I usually take two phases of approach. One is a qualitative, and then it's quantitative. I start with the qualitative precisely because I need to look at users in the eye, look at clients in the eye, and verify that the thing that I think is a problem for them, that the pain that they have, is actually real. Because sometimes we feel pain ourselves and we think that we are the representative user, and that's not the case. Sometimes we hear a couple of people within our business environment, within our market space, within our user space, say, oh, this sounds really cool. And we tend to have confirmation bias and just run with it. So by doing some one-on-one interviews to identify habits, to see not only where they feel pain, but also how they describe it, it gives you potential arguments, potential tweaks to your feature that will make it, more likely, it's called a reason to believe, but also gives you new ideas for, features or functionalities for your existing product that may just close the gap between it being a nice to have and a must have. So I put a can of Febreze cinnamon apple or clove apple there on the screen because, I've heard a fun story about this. So legend says that a certain unknown user and market researcher was speaking in a house in Mexico City to recently married women of low class or low socioeconomic class about how they clean and maintain their house with little resources. Because people, the Mexican people are an amazing folk, and I was surprised. Oh well, I guess I gave it away. I was surprised when I was in the neighborhood, particularly in the slums of Mexico, at how much effort housewives put into into keeping their homes clean. It was amazing how they managed to perform miracles with basically few dollars per month to clean a house of 2, 3 rooms, or 5, 7, 8 people living in the room. In specific, we were talking about scents and how to keep a house free of smells when it was a small room and people might smoke. The kitchen might not have enough ventilation, and we did this interesting study where we asked women who had granddaughters what they did to clean their house, and then we went and asked their granddaughters who were just married, what they learned from their grandmothers, because we knew that we suspected that if there was a generational bridge, that was probably a strong tradition that housewives would keep doing over the generations. So we asked them, your husband smokes, how do you keep the cigarette smoke out of the room? And, we thought they were going to put candles, oils, open the windows. So more than one lady goes out to the kitchen, grabs a nail of clove and grabs an apple, spears it right through, and puts it on a table. And then she says, in 8 hours, that apple and that clove will have sucked all the scent out. And it works, surprisingly, to a later or greater degree. But that immediately told us that if we make a clove and apple scented product, Mexican housewives and potentially many other similar cultures would believe that an apple and clove scent will mask the smell. And that's the reason why you have that, quote unquote, flavor of Febreze in certain supermarkets. And of course, we had this hypothesis, and we obviously validated with several thousand surveys. So let's talk about the quantitative. I like to have at least 400 people answer any survey that I do. The reason why it's 400 is so that if one person changes from the norm, it's at least a 0.25% difference. And even that's a small sample. But if, in a world where getting a few more clicks of a button or X% more engagement in single percentages, being able to have a minimum degree of granularity in the sub-percentage space is very important. And also, once you get into the 400 range, 300 range, you're in most human, behavior-driven problems, you're reaching statistical significance. But you use your findings from your qualitative to validate. You use your quantitative to validate your hypotheses and your findings from your qualitative. You test out the language that they use by, hey, tell me about these features or these problems that you have, and you try to copy the language. You ask variations of the same questions with different kinds of language, and you see which one they respond to the best. And then you use this, all this data to create a matrix of how they perceive your different product and feature ideas. So let's talk about qualitative. There are 4 specific segments of a questionnaire or a one-on-one interview that I like to do, and my recommendation is literally that they be one-on-one or 1 or 2 at the most, and that second person is there to basically take notes, observe the conversation, and just fill in any blanks that the main moderator may be missing. These 4 phases are, it's A, establish the problem space and make sure that both you and the respondent are, that you're both thinking of the same thing, that you define the same thing, and then ask them, okay, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this, and why do you engage in this specific problem space? Then you move into, okay, you want to find what they currently do in order to see how powerful it is, how much pain there is. And it's important that, you don't ask whether, non-leading questions, again, as you probably have heard, you don't tell them, does this work for you, or do you like this? You instead ask how, because that way they'll be, they won't be as predisposed to tell you that it does work or it does not work. And then you ask why, and they'll tell you an answer, and that's not the real answer. The real answer comes at least when you ask why 2 times, particularly in the consumer space, because now you start to get into the emotional drivers, which ultimately for most consumer products there's a big element of purchase consideration comes from emotions. From the B2B side, you do get emotions, and emotions do play a big part, but usually people talk, when you first ask them why, they're going to tell you their functional reason, or their the reason for their function, the reason for their role, to engage in these activities or to use a specific tool. You want to get one level above to say, okay, what is the, at the company level, what's the largest strategic need, or the largest company need, because sometimes you may find that the feature that you're thinking of is not the most powerful feature, but a feature above that, the targets a wider space, will get you more traction. So based on these two things, you move forward. A good moderator will have the instinct to present to either present their solution that they have in mind, because they see that, okay, we're more or less on the right track. The guy, the respondent is describing things the way I expect them, and they have said that they feel this pain, and they haven't told me any surprises about, they don't engage with the problem, or they use a tool that I was not expecting, a method that I was not expecting. So, you talk about, you either say, would you use a tool, and that's section 4, or you give them the room to ideate the solution, which is usually what I try to do. And it's, in an ideal world, a world where you can overcome or wave a magic wand at any problem, how would you do this? How would you wish the feature or the problem was solved? And then ask them, how do you envision that working, either in a business process context or as an admin tool, or basically ask them to, okay, how would you visualize it on a screen? How would you pitch it, or to somebody that would buy a service the way you would like to hear it. And an interesting question that I usually like to add is, why doesn't it exist? And you never know the question, the reasons that they give you. They might know that there are legal, for example. I had this issue in a fintech company where, like, there's a very old and standard traditional way of validating and getting some approvals, and technology could really speed it up, but it turns out that there are legal considerations why there is a forced delay between one step and the other. So we would have spent a lot of money, or a lot of time trying to figure out, how to speed up a process that can't be sped up in the first place. And we, as people that, I often has been the case that I've been in a startup that doesn't really know the business that they're getting into. And those are the ways that you avoid pitfalls that an expert would probably avoid. A very important question, obviously, is, of all the things that we've spoken about, all the different tweaks and solutions that we could give, is which one is the most important? And this is not a data point that I would use to forecast, to do mathematical modeling, but asking the question, hey, would you pay? Would you do the action? Is an important one, because if they say no in a one-on-one interview, if they're saying no, you really better pay attention. And if they do tell you no, really dig into the why. If they tell you yes, make them uncomfortable, because they will tell you, yeah, would you buy this? Yeah, sure. And it's only when you ask them, okay, how much would you pay for this? How often would you buy this? That the user or the potential user will actually think about the question that you're giving them, and actually put themselves in the mind of, I have to open my wallet to actually get access at this wonderful thing that this person is painting for me. Whew. That was a mouthful. So what do I do with all this qualitative information? I usually create what I call the user space, and I find that most products, when you think about who you're building them for and who's going to use it, most businesses, most product lines, I find that the way they're built run along two axes. One is how much I know about what I'm engaging in. Like, am I a master at my craft? I am for example, a very, very talented, very, I've been around the business a lot. I'm a stock trader. And there's people that think they know, but they feel very confident about themselves, and even though they may not know, or they just, they don't hesitate to dive in, even though they may be at risk of not doing the right actions. And I usually find that most users fall in a extreme space of these. It's very, it's you're in a good place when you get a sense that your potential users are very clearly in one of these quadrants, because that tells you what kind of solutions they are using, they're looking for, how far you can take them in terms of, okay, how many features do I cram into a single product versus how easy do I make it to use. Or you may make things easier to use and provide a lot of variety. Other people decide that you may be able to do more, but we're going to make sure that you do it within a very narrow, within a very narrow user flow, so that we ensure that you get the result that you want, because you are a dumb user who doesn't know what they're doing. And when I look at, for example, the different, centralized exchanges, the Coinbases, the Geminis, the Binances, the Krakens, I think that you can see hints of where each one of these lie. I tend to think of Binance as very much on the literacy expertise axis of it, slightly towards confidence and comfort. People that are going into Binance are trying to find novel ways to trade. They're usually pioneering, or they used to pioneer different instruments that other centralized exchanges slowly picked up, but they picked them up in a more user-friendly fashion, maybe in a more limited way of functionality. But it's because there are users that know it's possible. They have literacy in the topic. They've just never done it before, so they need empowerment. They need to be able to do that, but with somebody holding their hand, not somebody telling them what they should be doing, because that rubs against their egos, and egos are very, very fragile. So once I've built this user space, I take that back into what is my quantitative research. I want to make sure that part of the questions that I ask, and I'm only putting 4 questions here, but there's a bunch more that I would ask, and I'm happy to put example questions. In fact, I will put example questions in the curriculum. I will also add an overview of how I use the quantitative data that is gathered by these 4 questions. But before I jump into it, I want to make sure in my quantitative that that I can identify where on the quadrant these my target audience is, whether it's a mix or whether it's a very clear group within that space. I ask questions to, describe, I'm here to talk to you about this problem. Tell me which one of these statements ring most true to you. And these are paraphrase statements from your qualitative research, describing, this is the problem that I have. These are the pains that I feel. You also use your quantitative to, get an intention of all the methods and solutions that your qualitative research gave you, which ones are actually most popular at a large scale. All those kind of different questions that really help you put numbers to the hypotheses that you have, from when you first had the idea and from what you learned in your qualitative research. Now, 4 questions that I make sure that any quantitative study has are these 4 questions, and I'm not going to read them out loud for you. I include them in their full, in their full form, because I believe it's very important to ask them specifically this way. I've tweaked these questions over several years, and I find that these are the ones that give me the most clear, transparent results. The first one is basically based on what we learned. We have a bunch of feature and solutions ideas. Go over each one, and on a scale of 1 to 10, tell me how much you agree or disagree that this feature is relevant to the topic that we're speaking about. And then you ask, okay, the solutions that you have, how happy are you? Because the answer to this question, number 2, helps you normalize the answers from number 1. Somebody that is very satisfied with the solutions they currently use might not think that your current features are as important as they truly are, whereas somebody that is really, really frustrated with their current solutions might really read value into something that you're offering. And depending on where you want to take your product, you might want to go in one direction or the other. Now, question 3 is once again you rejigger, reshuffle the different features ideas, and now ask them, would you use an app for that specific, for that specific problem, to fix that specific feature that you are offering, and then you ask, okay, which one would you use the most? And that gives you an idea of, okay, which ones do people expect to see in an app just to use it, and which one is like, okay, this one is the one that if I see on the ad, if I read the description, it's gonna make me click into learn more. It's gonna click into the pricing page or click on the download page. So I've spoken about measuring these things on a scale of 1 to 10, about normalizing. So that clearly implies that I'm going to chart this data, that I'm going to analyze this data somehow. And this is the feature perception grid that I create based with those 4 questions. This is an example of a prop tech startup that I worked at that was specifically aimed at homeowners during their home ownership journey. So not buying a house, not selling a house, but all the parts in between. Because many homeowners think they think they know everything there is to know about the house, but they are clumsy AF. So every time they try to start a DIY project, they completely mess it up. Or users that know they need to do stuff, but they don't know how to do it. Of course, there's always very confident and knowledgeable homeowners that I've done it all. I can fix my fixtures. I can drywall. I have negotiated mortgages up the wazoo. So we had all these features, for how you can manage your home, things about managing the finances of your home, features about, looking into how you can improve your home, maintenance, all these sorts of things. Like I remember during my qualitative research, I was talking to this recent homeowner, and I was asking him about how much he knew about, how he could best leverage his rising home prices to, refinance, get some equity out, and reinvest it in the house. And we're talking, and he stops to say, hey, dude, all that is really well and good, but I am 4 years into my house, and that's point 1, because we kept thinking of homeowners as people that had been there for a long time and owned a lot of equity in their houses, and that's usually not the case. So he tells me, I'm 4 years into my mortgage. I have almost no equity, but 2 nights ago, my heater burst, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had no idea who to ask. So can you help me, figure out who to ask? And that led to that feature you see in the center of a panic button. And I thought like I said, this same interview, told me one of my beliefs about my target users is wrong. most of the users that I will speak to will have very little equity in their houses. But then I realized that this specific user that is so not confident about their literacy and their expertise, that they don't even know what to do. But we found that the people that he was an outlier in that sense, because a lot of people just saw it as literally middle of the road. And I hope that you can see, based on the wording of the previous questions, like how they link to this. You have the things that's the most important feature versus the ones that, yeah, these are nice, but would I download the app? Like, these are very relevant, but if they don't get selected as the, likely to download because of it, or the one most important feature, that kind of tells you that, like, people just expect it to be there. It's more like, if it's not there, I'm not interested, but I don't, it's not the reason why I would download it. Versus things that, people think it's very appealing, but it's not particularly important. Those are flashy things. Those are vanity features or quality of life features that you use as differentiators. They're not your main reason to believe, but they are, and also thanks to this, we enhance the experience, or we give you X more functionality. All right. Finally, you've done your qualitative work. You've gone back and you've, either tweaked or wrote new hypotheses for what your users and what your clients will want. You tested them quantitatively, and they told you, yes, these are very relevant problems, and your features seem to be exactly what I need to solve my problem. Are they actually going to click? Are they actually going to buy? And the only true way that you can measure this is by putting it out there. We go full circle back to paper prototypes, to functional prototypes, and to the full MVP. However, you don't need those at all to get the first sense of whether they will click or not. I do this all the time. I create fake brands. And I invest a little bit of money with a designer and an artist. Hey, let's make these nice looking logos. Let's grab some nice top pictures and use the words and the language that we found from all our research to describe problems. And either, if it's a simple enough concept, put them on an ad somewhere where our target users are likely to see them, and just see how many people click. When they click, take them to a site that gently lets them down, and then offer them a further act to engage. And usually this is, hey, actually this is I know I'm harping on Airbnb. This is the second time I used their example, but one of the tests that they did was before, as they were figuring out, is this worth doing or not, they put an ad out for, hey, you can rent a room in whatever conference, and then people would click on it and they would say, hey, we're really sorry, and they made sure to run this very early, like way before the event, so people that clicked on it wouldn't be screwed. But they say, hey, we're very sorry that we don't have this. However, we are about to build it, and we'd like to thank you for having clicked on this with, I think it was a $50 Amazon gift card. And since you seem to be interested in this, can we get your email so we can tell you as soon as our services is open? And basically, that gave them a lot of. It gave them a quick read on, should we do this before we go try and run this test in New York City. But it also earned them early goodwill and early adopters, because everybody that got their $50 Amazon gift card, I'm sure, was way more open to engaging with them again, and will remember them down the road when they come calling. So I highly encourage you that you get creative. And the second step, when you ask them to sign up, be an early adopter, be a beta tester, join our mailing list, it is the earliest indicator of actual intent to purchase. And again, I hope that if, something that you're getting out of all my slides is you need data. You need to measure your stuff. You need to be sure of what you're doing. One of the conversations that we were having in the curriculum channel with the mentors is, Web3 is in its infancy, and we tend to get high off our own supply a lot. We believe a lot. We are in echo chambers. So we tell one another, yeah, your idea is great. You really should, I love it. That's the vision. But how many projects are going out there that on paper sounded great, but they didn't get the amount of users that they wanted. The problem that they were trying to solve was too small, in the sense that, yeah, some people felt it and they felt it very strongly, but it wasn't enough to gain the traction one needs. So just having any amount of confidence will not only let you create better products and enter into this with a more targeted language, but when you go to potential investors, when you're doing your 1-minute pitches, you can say, hey, we've tested this, we have confidence that we're going to get this conversion and that we're going to be able to make this much revenue. And we're able to defend it because we have X, Y, and C points of data. And I find that investors really like data. All this is basically my playbook for validating user research before I even start to write specs and draw wireframes. And before I close this, two books that I'm a big believer in for user research, for problem validation, is the first one is Don't Make Me Think. It's really about product ideation. It is an old book. It's a classic. As you can see, it was basically made for post, right after the .com bust, and things were starting to pick up again, and usability actually became relevant. So post GeoCities web time. Steve Krug is a big influence on me. He is the reason why I speak very cynically of my users, and I say that they are ignorant, that they're dumb, and they have fragile egos. I think it makes me a better product manager when I don't have high opinions of my users. And also, I know that there were, somebody else was going to speak in this class in more detail about design user research and usability, and I'm happy to go. I was expecting them to really dive into it, so I didn't, go very far in that direction. But if you want to talk about it, if you want to schedule time with me or visit my office hours, this is something I have a lot of fun with, and I just enjoy doing it. If another book, if you're thinking about, okay, how do I design problems how do I design solutions for the problems that I am seeing or hearing about in my research? Why Not is a great. And not only is it a fun read, it's a short read, but it really presents a new way to approach problems. And again, I apologize because clearly most of this is B2B, is B2C phase. Please ask me, redirect questions towards B2C stuff if you need to, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. But that is a good segue to me telling you that's it. How much time did I take? Wow, I took a long time.
No, you're fine because you covered 2 separate topics, so good.
But anyway, that's it. Do you guys have any questions?
I really like the framing everything as sort of like a hypothesis in a way. I really like that.
Good. I agree. I really like that too. I'm a big fan.
So my question is, thanks again. I mean, it's very neat and clear presentation, no? So my question is, especially with your last comment, no? This works a lot on B2C, no?
Yeah.
On Web3, and especially products are aimed for DAOs like ours.
Yeah.
You have this monster with a lot of heads, no? How would you tackle this market intelligence, no? Where you don't have like one clear user, but this monster with a lot of heads, no?
Actually, I mean, the great thing about DAOs is they are communal by nature.
Yeah.
And they exist on platforms, usually Discord, that lends itself very easily to surveying them.
Okay.
Actually, I think it's a very fertile place to do that research because you can encourage a lot of participation and get, as you say, data and needs from very diverse users, but you can also, if you have enough information about which disciplines or which roles are asking those questions, you can really target and differentiate, okay, these are the people that really feel my pain and they are engaging in they're part of the department that I'm trying to, or the discipline that I'm trying to service, so I'm going to pay more attention to these. I would do the qualitative research with the leads, if there are any, of specific working groups. And I'm speaking in Olympus language because that's the DAO that I spend the most time with. I would look at them for your qualitative questions first and ask them, hey, who are the people that you are collaborating with the most, and follow up more one-on-one interviews with them.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. I guess just my follow-up would be, so it's clear that you also want the decision maker in your surveys, no? So you find the problem, but you also want the decision maker to see if your hypotheses are covering that problem, no? So when you don't have a clear decision maker, no? So you have some sort of process that you have to go through, no? How would you tackle that, no? And I'm not saying that you should not do what you're saying, no? I mean, that's all data, that's super important. But I guess the only way to do it is at the end is, okay, let's put the product out there. No?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's always the best thing to do. But I'd like to dig a little further. Can you give me an example of such a situation?
No, I mean, I'm thinking in my user case, so Chelo's user case in specifically. So if we want to see which other products we should develop, no? Because the ones that we're developing are like the most obvious for community engagement and help, no? But I think there are a lot of other products that can be there out there, no? So if you want to understand what other things they need, no, as an individual that are part of a community, no, how would you go around it, no? And then how can you make sure that if you solve that problem, the DAO as a whole would be able to approve it, no? So and this is our specific situation, no? So the tools that we're developing are for DAOs to be able to use their treasury to help their community, no? So the problem are individual, but the DAO has to approve them as a community, no?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think normally in typical organizations, you have a decision maker, right, that you pitch to, maybe a committee, but you'd normally try to find the decision maker and avoid committee decisions that take forever. So in a DAO where the goal is to have voting decentralized and community approved, who do you pitch? Like, I guess sometimes you do have a decision maker for a certain project or responsibility, but maybe more often than web.
Well, I would suggest that in those situations, it's very, very important that you are able to, your challenge is going to be, I need to convince an entire DAO that this is important. I need to be able to present this, describe this in a way that is as close to universally understood and appreciated as possible. And the only way I can believe that is possible is if you validate your problem and how it's described across several DAOs. The one thing that my mind keeps coming back to is are we basing all our work on one DAO, on two DAOs? Because then you're really going more into the lighthouse customer approach, which is very B2B, in which you have specific relationships, long-term relationships with a client that is willing to take your technology while it's still in development for a discount, and in exchange, or even for free, but in exchange, what they get is you get it's their logo. Hey, this DAO or this company uses us. And in both of those cases, I think it's just a question of doing enough research so that you're able to target, so you're able to find who you need to talk to and or who you need to appeal to within an entire DAO, and how they describe it. And I think that's just putting a lot of feelers out there across several organizations, because there should be a single commonality that you should be able to piece out. I do see though the challenge that you have in terms of there are no single. It's harder to target a hive mind than a group of minds.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole meta level above it that one needs to think about.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Maybe what is potentially similar with traditional organizations is when you need a decision by committee, you still look for internal sponsors, somebody who's an advocate who you can connect with and can begin influencing internally with credibility the committee or the community.
In my experience, that also happens in DAOs. Most relationships between a DAO are still done because of social connections than anything else.
Right.
Yeah, so you need to find your champion, no? Your internal champion.
Right.
Okay,
right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Honestly, this sounds a lot like, rather than a business, it really does more, you have the term governance, right, token. It really feels like you are playing a political game more than you're playing like a business game, right? You're kind of going in, convincing a political party that getting that champion, You're a lobbyist, right?
Yep, that's right. Soft power.
A cynical approach to this would be find the people with the largest stacks and convince them.
Yeah.
It's not the best approach, but it'll definitely work.
Yeah, especially because the voting system, right, typically is, just that. It's whoever's got the largest stack gets 85% of the vote.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.